Hey everyone, it's Nathan, your curator of curiosity here at Curioporium, located in Southington, Connecticut. And thank you for joining me for our next episode, episode 6 of the Curio Chronicles, titled The Curious Christian. Yes, I am he, I am they, I am the curious Christian. I was born and raised in the Catholic Church. And let me tell you, is it curious, from rituals to magic to you name it, costumes, pageantry, incense, commanding the spirits to come down. It is one of the most curious places that you could be. So please join me on this episode. Grab your rosaries, grab your holy water. Here we go.
The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
All right, and welcome back. So here we are, the Curious Christian. Now, let me just say right now, I am not practicing. I've spent my whole entire life, basically, up until college in the church. My family, of course, we're all Catholic. My devout Catholic aunt raised me during my formative years. I went to private Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, and then Jesuit college. However, the biggest thing I can say is, yes, I was that student. I was the student who always did the papers on exorcism. Being a curious person of myself, being raised, as we've talked about before in other episodes, just brought up with this mind, this mind of filled with fantasy and magic and curiosity. And then let's kind of put that against, being raised from a very young age in a formal religion. How do those things kind of mesh together? And I had such a unique outlook, really throughout my whole entire life, on religion. And for, the sake of this podcast, when I say religion, we'll be talking about, Roman Catholicism. We'll be talking about their God and everything. It was just something that struck me from a very early age that I can remember, going to mass. And I'll keep, referring to my aunt, ma tante. Yes, as I mentioned before, I am French. My aunt is ma tante in French. I remember sitting at church. Part of my family from my mother's side, they were all Catholic. Everyone born and raised in the church. And for myself, it was kind of, that's what you did. You went to a Catholic elementary school, and you learned, and you went in, and you had to get your sacraments, and you get from baptism all the way up and everything. And I had this open feeling in terms of religion, kind of like outward. I was involved in everything, and getting my first communion and all of that. I mean, I was very, very involved in all of that. And it made my aunt extremely happy, and proud that I did well in all my religious classes. I think in high school, was it a peer ministry I belonged to? You were the peer ministers, and we'd go on retreat, and you got to wear a cross to school. And she was happy with that. But with everything, there's those things that we do to make others proud of you, because we feel that's what we have to do. But at the same time, I was listening, and I was watching, and I was learning. So from that very early age we'll go through all of this, like from the church itself that we used to go to. It was St. Lawrence O'Toole in Hartford. That was my aunt's church, as well as my other aunt, my mother's sister. I believe she was a deacon there, and so was her husband. just the church itself. I mean, here you are, a little kid. You've got to get up early on Sunday because you Sunday mass is the only one that counts. That's what I learned. There's Saturday mass. Saturday mass doesn't count. No, at least not where I grew up. No, no. Those were you weren't really a Christian or Catholic if you went to Saturday mass. You had to go to Sunday mass, and it was usually the 10 o'clock. I think around there, the 10 o'clock. And so, imagine you're growing up in this household. And my aunt at the time was in her 60s, and you're getting ready for church, and you're getting dressed, and she's picking up her friends, and you're driving to this great, huge monument, of shining stone, and you walk in, and it's just stained glass windows, and I can remember the pews and the smell, and there, in and of that, there's everything you go through when you're younger. And I do remember, so my youngest recollection was of this magical castle place. So when you're that young, you're like, okay, um sights and sounds and everything, and kneeling and the benches, and I was kind of, really intrigued by it. And as you're going through Catholic elementary school, you're beginning to learning the meaning of church. And I went to St. Bridget in West Hartford, which is no longer there. Of course, there's St. Bridget Church, which I believe is still there. So, the church was right down the street. I believe on the campus of where my church was, there was a place for nuns right there. And if I'm not mistaken, it was, oh, what was I told when I was little? It was a place for at-risk women. So, so in my head, I always thought, there are these at-risk women living with these nuns, like right by your school. But you're learning your classes, and religion was just part of it. It wasn't, you're just learning everything about the church, and as well as other religions. I mean, I need to stress that. I mean, we would learn about other religions as time went on. But something fascinated me with these rituals and these rites. And when I say rituals, not very many people will say, oh, being raised Catholic or in a Catholic church, there's rituals. But there are. I mean, I believe some of the books that priests have, they're called like the Ritual Romani, or the Roman Rituals of Rome, the Missal of Rome. And rituals is a word that is used, and I think connotation of ritual is pagan and things like that. But lest we forget where a lot of these rituals came from. They were either adopted, corrupted from different other religions and pagan religions and things like that. I mean, there's the long outstanding history. But something to me, I always questioned, and I was always mostly questioning inside myself, because it did seem magical in a way. There's the seven sacraments, and like, whoa, wow, I think one thing I wrote a paper on was the seven sacraments as like the seven stages of a magician in his show. Just so just follow me just quickly. So, a magician has an opening. That's like the buy-in, right? They call it, there's like specific names for people who practice stage magic. And, well, what is baptism? That's the beginning, and then there's the whole thing of, building up the audience, and you have the first communion, and then, as you go through, and at the end, you have the prestige, the payoff, and all of that. And it's very much like marriage. And, so like, yes, there were papers like that when I did go to sophomore and had to write a paper, we had nuns still at the time. They were none too happy. And we had this one particular nun. If anybody went out, shout out to everyone South Catholic. Back then their habits were kind of a bluish purple. And this lovely nun, I mean, she was absolutely lovely, but being a sophomore stupid kid, everyone called her Sister Mary Blueberry. Sister Mary Blueberry. If you're from South Catholic at that time, you know exactly who I was talking about. I mean, this woman put up with a lot, but she did not appreciate my insight into kind of linking these two things. But that's how I was. I was always asking, those weird kind of questions, and thinking about, the Catholic God, and you know, I mean, just take that for instance, like learning there's three people in one. I'm like, that sounds like some spiritual magic stuff going on. There's three people in one person. And one of them, you tell me, is this omnipotent thing that created everything. The next one is a ghost. And then the last one is a mortal man. And I'm like trying to calculate this in my head, in my young head. And what's the biggest thing they say? Faith. You just accept it. You take it on faith. I mean, now being 50 years old, you take it on faith equals don't ask any questions. So here I am, sitting thinking about this, and learning about all this stuff in the church, and being like, wow, you know, we're reading stuff from the Bible, and it's got these stories in it, and it's got angels, and it's got demons. I mean, the Old Testament is one of the best fantasy books you can read, in my opinion. There are so many stories that don't get told, that, because everything's cherry picked over time and changes as translations and translations and translations of the Bible. But I was reading these, and it was like, whoa, and they're the demons and dogs and dragons, and, creation of the earth. It's like, it really gets you. I mean, listen, you're a kid with an avid imagination. I mean, it's perfect. It's like it gets you, all right about the story. There's not, it was blood and guts too, and people dying and people getting wiped out and plagues, and sounds like a movie plot. So growing up, I was like, that got me a little bit hooked. So I started reading other things on my own, going down to Hartford Public Library when it was a library. And what I mean by that is, I mean, it's a great cultural center right now, and places, they have so much stuff. But back in my day, it was all books. It was all books, floor to ceiling basement books. And I would go in there, and I would go to the alternative religion section. The books about, was Lucifer bad, or the fallen angels. And really, that's is where this curiosity started fully evolving in terms of what I can consider mysticism in religion, where these two roads kind of intersected for me. Yes, I'm sitting there in church on Sunday, and you can ask my wife right now, my wife of almost 30 years, I can drop of the hat, I can repeat the parts of the Mass and the prayers because it's drilled. It's drilled. But how much to me in my mind was this? I'm listening to all these people. This sounds like the chanting that I read in these books about paganism. It sounds similar to these fantasy books when there was wizards casting spells and they need a choir of people. We have a choir of saints. And I started really thinking about it, and I really felt early on that something told me it was okay. And what I mean by that is, if you're really devout and there's things you're not even touching on the subjects, you've probably already burned your iPhone, thrown holy water on it, gonna say a bunch of rosaries for me. But in all honesty, something had said, it's not bad to ask these questions. And I know my aunt knew I had them, and I know she knew um, that I had this avid imagination. But the way I was thinking about things, and the way I was thinking about my religion, or how I was raised, it kind of brought me closer in a way. Because, for instance, we're talking about, like, I've been enthralled with Jesus. Okay, let's take Jesus as he is in the Bible, and Catholic, and Son of God, and the whole thing that they teach you. I could never shy away from this curious thing of looking at his life and the things he did and miracles. And, back then miracles equaled magic. And he performing, what's the difference between performing a miracle and performing magic? You perform magic, you're going to get burned at the stake. Well, actually, come to think of it, didn't something similar happen to Jesus? Oh boy, that's a can of worms. Uh, but the whole things of when I'm reading these books on alternative religions, and then you take into account high school and Buddhism and all these different ones, and I'm like, well, where does Jesus that I was raised with kind of fit in here? And is he a mystic? Is he, that was a thing. He's a mystic. They said he's possessed by demons, and all of that. And then you put it in like, well, he's part of this larger thing, and um, it's funny. It's not funny, but it's just like a lot of times when we read things, people said, "Oh, Jesus, you did miracles," and he'll always say, "No, I didn't do miracles. It's by the gift. Was it by the gift of God through me? I'm the channel." If you're a strange and unusual person, that sounds a lot like contacting and getting power from someone else, doesn't it? So these two things in my mind became ubiquitous with each other. It's like, how do I remedy these two things? Because they are so similar. They are so similar. And then when I started getting into cultures of the world and seeing these rituals and these rites, and I mean, how many times would I argue, with some of the nuns and teachers, is you're saying that this thing called I can't even say the word to this day, transubstantiation, which is the belief of the bread and wine turning to body and blood when you eat it. Excuse me. It's supposed to be literal. Like, blew my, like, literal. I'm like, literally. So you're saying that, that I pulled the card. So you're saying we're a cannibal, and they're like, no, no, no. But then it becomes, no, it's metaphorical, but it's not. It's you're actually doing it, and that's the whole thing of the ritual. And if you believe it enough, so that was always there was like almost like, I'll say the word like duplicitous, but that's taking a bad connotation. But it was the duality, I guess, is a better word, of what you're presented with and what my curious mind was thinking. Those things surrounding this religion in my upbringing were so at odds at some times, and at other times they weren't. As like in college, I went to a Jesuit college, and they're always about asking questions and give you, the Jesuits give you a little bit of leeway there. They give you a little bit of leeway. So as I was drinking some pints with one of the Jesuits, because that's how they roll, I started asking those questions. And again, he had said they can't give me any really good answers. It's all in how it's perceived and presented. If you're presented that this way of doing things is bad and you'll burn in hell, that's the bad way. You won't do it. Witchcraft, burn in hell. The whole, not even to get into the whole thing of Satanism, and which for myself, I thought the days of Satan, and if you have a incense, or if you have a sigil, I thought those days were past. Believe me, let's just say that kind of got reaffirmed for me when I moved, when Curioporium reopened, I guess. There's still a lot of people that will put certain things together and be like, you're Satanist, or you satanic things. And it's those people really that talk and speak from how they were raised, that don't have a full understanding of things, that just kind of was like, whoa, what year are we in? Is this the satanic panic? What, you know? And it's just small innocuous things. Because we know Curioporium is the hot haven for Satanists, or so people have told me. Um, Sorry, a little sidetrack there. Get a little sidetrack quickly, but even with that, I mean, like talking about Satan and it's this and worshipable. Well, really, how much research have you done? Even on the surface, he was an angel. He had a disagreement with God over certain things, that and the war in heaven and everything. And then you can take it as Lucifer, Satan, little horn, evil. But then there's like this other kind of portrayal of that part where it's the opposite. It's light, it's dark. Ooh, what does that sound like? Sounds like Star Wars. The same thing. We're the Catholics. You're the Satanists. I mean, really think about it. And that was the thing that the Jesuit was telling me. He was like, think about it. Don't follow the book. Don't go by the book. It's not a rule book. Use it as a personal guide. And that's the whole thing. It comes in, your personal Jesus and everything like that. But for myself, it was kind of, being in college, it was, wow, okay, someone's finally putting this together. Like, how can I go to church as the age I was as a college student, or get married, let's say, get married in Catholic church, which I was. It wasn't a question for me, which is really weird. It wasn't a question for me. It was like, I'm getting married in a Catholic church. My wife is not Catholic. And, one of the things I do remember, and I'll share this with everybody, another quick one, is sitting in this church. There's this church I love this church. It's a church down in Hartford. And my aunt belonged to the church, this one, for various things. It wasn't the St. Lawrence O'Toole. It was another one. And I wanted to get married in it. I always thought it was a beautiful church. I spent many a midnight mass. I love me some midnight mass. Let me tell you, midnight mass, Boar's Head Festival, amazing just pageantry that sparked that inner curiosity. So I wanted to get married in this church, and I remember sitting there. You have to go in and meet with the priest. And I remember my wife sitting there, and I'm sitting there, and a priest across from us, and just question. Goes up to my wife. He's like, Nathan, I know you're on. Goes up to my wife. He's like, are you Catholic? She said, no. Looks at her and says, okay, then I'm not going to talk to you for the rest of the meeting. I'm going to talk to him. Now, I knew this was coming. My wife had no idea. I mean, she's not. She's Korean, born and raised in Brazil, a little bit of the Korean, Seventh-day Adventists, all that. So she's like sitting back in her chair. And, of course, they're going to ask me the questions, are you going to raise your kids this way? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? Check the boxes. Okay, I can marry you. But in my mind at that time, like, this is the way, we were getting married in church. You didn't get married outside of a church. Are you crazy? That's kind of weird. Like, it was like, no, even for that, and how uncomfortable it was for my wife. Like, and that always spawned questions throughout our marriage. And to this day is, her asking me about the religion and the way I was raised and this and Catholic. And she just blows her mind when I tell her some of these things. It blows her mind when I tell her some of these things. So, like, that was her first experience. And I had to, even with my kids are baptized. Why? Just in case. I know what it sounds like, just in case. You never know. All the stuff's about the end of the world may be right. Just in case. For those of you who aren't Catholic and know about baptism, is supposedly every child is born with original sin, the sin of everybody. And the only way to get rid of it is for them to get baptized. Otherwise, they're damned and they're automatically going to hell. So you got to get your kid baptized. Now, whether you're baptized in Catholicism or you're baptized in any of the other, Pentecostal or whatever, it's the same. It's basically the same kind of idea. You have to be baptized to be in there, to wipe away that sin. And then, of course, confirmation is um, another thing. It's because baptism, you're a baby, you can't like renounce Satan, so they just need to double check when you're a teenager. So it's basically like another baptism where you get to answer and say yes, you reject Satan. But this time, you have a sponsor behind you, kind of backing you up. Yeah, backing you up as you're rejecting Satan. Um, and also, come to think of it, I'm having a thought right now. So when you're baptized, you have your baptism name. And when you're confirmed, you also pick a confirmation name. Well, in some studies of the occult, it is said if a demon has it's both, I believe it goes both ways, that if you know the real name of a demon, you have power and control over them, and if they know your real name, they have power and control over you. So I'd love to kind of look at more about the whole reason of why you're picking another name. I'm just filing that away. That's how I do it. I'm filing it away. um so looking at this, we go from my wife, and we go from showing her that, but sitting there with a Jesuit priest again. I mean, it was just blowing my mind. Here I am, college student, learning this, and then really being able to talk to somebody. You could not talk to any priests or nuns about this growing up, but just this dialogue I was having with this Jesuit was really impactful for me. And then the other thing that was impactful for me in college was I was a theater major. And one of the theater classes had to do with theatricality within the church, within war, how Hitler had used pageantry and costumes, for what he was doing. But I centered in on the portions we talked about the church and the ceremony and the robes and the songs and the hymns and the chanting and the incense. And yes, everything, you're told has a meaning, but if you really look at the pageantry of it, it's a ritual, it's a rite. There is no difference. There's only the theological difference, and the difference that people have in terms of what's right or wrong between a ritual of that occurs in a church, in a Catholic church, to a ritual of any of the number of rituals which people are like are occult or pagan, the summer solstice ritual. Like there is no difference in my mind. And that's kind of where like the Curioporium came in. There is no difference within my mind of these things. They're all there to be discovered and explored. And there's so many, I find so many similarities, all the time, that I'm like, wow, okay. And it was merely just me stepping back and saying, yes, you've got to pull out this book, which has all the magical words in it that you memorize, like spells, that you recite, like an incantation, that have hand gestures, like casting spells. And for those of you that are listening who can't see this on the video that I'm doing, I did a little cross on my head, a little cross on my lips, a little cross on my heart. And if you're Catholic, you know exactly what that means. You're keeping the word of God in your mind, your thoughts, in your words, in your heart. But these are automatic things, like, when something's scary in movies, what they do, people cross yourself. The Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, ward it off. You're giving power to a symbol. Ooh, that's an amulet. So when, I bring this back to Curioporium, and just the curiousness of it is, it's a big part of it too. This whole thing of religion and my upbringing and being that curious Catholic. I have to say, I absolutely love curating the religious things that I have here. The rosaries, the holy water holders. I was so amazed at, let's say, the tools that the priest was using. This thing he'd dip in water and was able to spray water over the crowd. Like, first thing I do, Curioporium, is like, where can I get one of these? The thing with the incense, and if again, it's this big huge thing. It's very much, you know, kind of Moroccan, kind of Hebrew type canister, and it's just, wow, look at that. Where can I get those? Where can I get these special candles? And there's some vendors that, I go directly to for different churches who do supply these. And they're just amazing. And I love them coming in. Like, the first time I was able to order and hold a stainless steel rosary was just crazy in my head. And these are here. Go down, if you're Catholic and you're Latino or you're Mexican, and we have milagros. If you know what those are, we have those here. Yes, we have real holy water, but also we have, something called Florida water, which is not from Florida. We'll get into that in another episode. It's not. It's basically like the Latin holy water. Same thing. It's used a lot. It's used in daily life. Believe me. So bringing those things together, it was, really was starting to give me this outlet for what I was thinking about religion and the curious nature of it. And I mean, we have a huge selection of books, Bibles. Bibles is one of our biggest things that we do sell. But I love the Bible. I love what the Bible means, what it is. Like, just there's something about it. And then when we do get Bibles, sometimes that are ones that priests would use when they do, home visits and things like that. I mean, those are special. Or a lot of the Bibles we get on the inside cover, there's some sort of inscription because somebody, a mother or someone's giving it to someone either on their first communion or something like that. But again, the curiousness of it. A lot of times people say, at dinner parties, you don't talk about what, religion or politics. Well, I find religion so fascinating. And in this episode, we're only talking about, Roman Catholic and Catholics. We're not talking about the other religions I studied and kind of where I was taking a little bit from this and a little bit from that and kind of adding it together, just like Curioporium. And it never seemed wrong. And like I said earlier on, I felt like something or someone or some three, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, said it was okay to do. And I think that's one of the things is people, I mean, there's wars fought over religion, people die. Like, there's so much tragedy that surrounds it. But again, it goes back to that my God is better than your God. My this is better than your this. I mean, that was the reason that the Catholic Church, abolished all of these other religions. And okay, well, we'll borrow your pagan this and kind of make it Christmas, call it Christmas, but we'll do it this way. That's, if we really think about it, it was like, we want to keep you. So we're going to kind of change stuff where you'll be able to kind of see this and think, oh yeah, you can remember your religion, but we're really going to say this is new, this is ours. And that's the whole thing. It's like sometimes people were like, how can you be doing Easter in your shop? And I'm like, how can you be doing Austera? It's the same thing. It's just it's different sides of the same coin. Absolutely. For me, it has a little bit deeper meaning. And, for kids coming in, they're like, oh, in the shop we have it come hunt down eggs and stuff. And we put curious stickers in there. What's the other saying? Keep Christ in Christmas. I have a whole show about Christmas, let me tell you, boy. But again, it's how we want to see ourselves. in this curious nature of asking questions. And just for me, it's not going to be the same for everybody else, but being able to discuss religion on kind of this level, not haha, let me say this and then I'll prove you wrong, and you're a cannibal because you're eating blood and this, and you're a hypocrite. Like, man, it just doesn't, it comes a time, it just doesn't for me make sense. I know who I am, what makes me up, what makes up my beliefs, and I'm going to continue to believe what I believe. And I continue, even to this day of being, June, what, 9th or whatever, and still people being like, wow, this is, Curioporium is a really bad place. It's, watch out the religion. And I had somebody come in here today, and as they were leaving, they asked if, oh, you should have holy water, but she was kind of serious. Do it on your way out. And I've gotten that one a lot, but I kind of at this point was, again, I was thinking what I was going to do for this next episode, and that kind of was what sparked it. And as the lady was leaving, you can hear a chime going off, which is, chimes, bells. Why are they on store doors? It was to protect the stores. It was so when you went in, not just to let the proprietor know that, there's somebody there. The chime is actually to cleanse the person when they come in, so of any ill thoughts, and as they leave. That's what really bells on the door were for. I'm sorry to break it to some people that I know, but that's what they are. So in my mind, the lady's like asking me, she's like, do you should have some holy water. And I'm like, well, you just went through the door with the chime, so you're good. You're good. But of course, some people are open to that conversation. Some people are not. Some people are curious. Some people are not. And that's where the crossroads of the religion for me in my life and the curiosity in my life really could have started at odds, but from a very, very early age. And even with my aunt, who was devout, understood. And for those of you who are listening who know Matount and are in my family, you know how she was. Yes, she was devout. Yes, she would follow everything, but everybody, pretty much knows the real her. You can have the Matount that volunteered and killed herself doing stuff for herself, her friends, giving up everything of oneself, life of service. But then I also remember her, as I said in the last episode, hemming and sewing drag queens' dresses. So if the dichotomy that's right there, just in that sentence. But I think, for her in the curiosity, she knew that was there, and my friends, and like comic books and this and fantasy, and never, she saw the books that I would get. She never commented. She never said anything. Never had to sit down and talk, and you're going wayward from God. Like, no, we did have that conversation. But it is an important element. And the reason why I think I wanted to kind of talk and, just delve into this is what I've been noticing. I've been hearing from people, again, individuals who've been listening to the podcast. Again, I appreciate it. But also somebody again today had said, you kind of open yourself up. And from the very first episode, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be vulnerable, and I want to be honest, and I want to be authentic. And I think this is just another part. Religion's always going to be one of those hot button topics. But for me, it's not anymore. And it's just one of these wonderful things that when I look around, I don't disassociate what Curioporium is and the items I have with the way I was raised religiously. I don't. I see them as sitting as close, the rosaries, even though they're, at the front of the shop, and we have kind of what everyone calls the occult section in the back, they're so akin to each other in my mind that I wish more people felt that way. There isn't really a barrier, and it doesn't make them at odds, and it doesn't make one better than the other. It actually helps it. What's the difference between a rosary and runes? Think about it. What's the difference? What's the difference from holy water in sage, which even sage goes way further back? But what's the difference of the purification qualities? What's the difference between keeping a cross in your pocket and keeping maybe a piece of obsidian in your pocket for protection? Is it the intent? I mean, what is it? Where are these things drawn? If I'm coming from just myself as the owner of Curioporium and what people come in here for, does it matter? If one shelf, I have this really great books about the Bible and the geography and the places. And then we'll have another book in the back that's beautiful about the geography and the places of England that were hotspots for witchcraft and this, and it's all historical. There's no difference. They each have a spot on my coffee table. And I think if more people took kind of a look or a point of view like that curiosity would just awaken and open more. Because I do feel if you're coming in, it's like, oh my God, you're going to burn in hell. Like, you're not curious. You're closed-minded. Again, that's only my opinion. Still come into Curioporium if you want. Say I'm going to burn in hell, or if I have holy water, that's fine. But you did come in. That's the important part. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. Once again, I'm Nathan, your curator of curiosity, and thank you for joining me for episode 6 of the Curio Chronicles. And make sure you're always staying curious. See you again next time.